Hi everyone and welcome to a new video on the CBI channel. In this tutorial series we're developing a full stack web application with Python Django in the backend and React.js in the front end. And in the end, that will look something like this, with a nice looking navigation menu and also functionality to create, read, update, and also delete records. Now, this is not the first video in this series. In fact, we've already done 3 before, in which we've set up the Python Django backend. We've also completed the setup of the React.js frontend, and I already showed you how to create different pages and enable page navigation with React Router. In this video, we're going to continue and we're going to create a nice looking navigation menu with links to all of the pages inside of our app. And at the end of the video, our application will look like this, where the content of the pages will be wrapped around a nice looking navigation menu. All of the items on the menu will be links to different pages and are also highlighted whenever they are selected. And we have the possibility to display menu items, but also sub items, and also a button that can allow us to open a full menu or to close it and to show an icon menu. Now, to realize this, we're going to be following 6 steps. We're going to start with the basics, which means installing some packages for Material UI, create a very basic navbar based on an example, and also add the navbar to all of the pages of our application. Then we're going to really improve the navigation menu by adding menu items and links, and also make sure that we can determine which item in our navigation menu should be selected. I'm going to show you how you can add an image to your navigation menu so that you have your logo on the top. And we're also going to be creating some functionality so that we can display either a full navigation menu or a smaller icon menu. Now, during this series, we're going to be using components from Material UI. And Material UI is a component library that offers all different kinds of blocks of code out of the box, which can save us a lot of time when doing the development. Now, obviously, when you want to use these different types of components inside of your code, the first thing that you need to do is make some installs to make sure that you can use everything that this package has to offer. So that is going to be the first step in this video. So we're going to click Getting Started, and then we're going to go to the installation. Now in here you can see that for the default installation we need packages for @mui/material, we need @emotion/react, and we also need @emotion/styled. So I'm going to be copying over this command right here and install this inside of our application. And I will also include the link to this inside of the description, so you can just copy over the command there as well. So we are now inside of our project code, and the first thing that we want to do is open a new terminal. And then we're going to cd into our frontend, because the navbar is going to reside inside of the frontend code. Now in there, we can paste in the command of npm install, and then it will install all of the packages for us. And just like that, the installation is complete. Now actually, we want to install some additional things from Material UI as well, because if we scroll down a little bit, you will see separate installs for icons. And during this video, especially when we're creating a navigation menu, we will be using some icons from Material UI as well, because that makes your application really stand out. So we're also going to install @mui/icons/material. So again, we're going to be copying over this command, and inside of the terminal, we paste in the npm install and hit enter. And now that this install is complete, we can use everything that we need from Material UI, and also the first step of this video is fully done. The next step will be implementing a very basic example of a navigation menu inside of our project. Now I'm going to be placing all of the items for my navigation menu in a separate folder. So we're going to open the frontend folder, go to source and then components. And inside of the components folder, I will be creating a new folder called navbar, just to separate the work for the navigation menu and the rest of our application. Now, to get a nice example that we can get started with, we can actually return to the documentation from Material UI, because there in the components section of the documentation, we will find a separate section completely dedicated to navigation. And if we then go to drawer, we will see some examples right here that we can just use inside of our application as is. Now we have examples for responsive draws, persistent draws, which will work like that. Also on the other side. And then some variants with mini drawers, some permanent drawer right here, and also the permanent drawer like this. Now the example that we want to be using from the start onwards is going to be the clipped drawer. And the reason for that is that this is quite a basic example, and we can build on this to make it more extensive as this video progresses. Now, to get this inside of our project, we can show the code that is below right here. And then we can copy over everything that is in here and use it inside of our project. So now we're going to go back to our code. And in the navbar folder, I will create a new file called navbar.jsx. And in there, I'm going to paste the total code that we have just seen from Material UI. And let's save that. Now, if we inspect this code, we can already see how this thing is structured. So right here on the top, you can see a section for the app bar. And the app bar is related to the top bar right here, which is in the blue. Then after that, you can see that it has drawers. And the drawer is the thing that we see on the side. Then if we scroll down, we can see different menu items which are currently inside of a list. And in this example, it just maps over a few different items in a list and it creates an item for every one of them. And that is what we see on the left right there. And then as the last thing, if we scroll all the way down, you can see that it adds some typography in the middle. And if we go to the example, that represents the text that we see here. Now, one thing that we can already change here is the name of the function, because here it's called clipped drawer, but I want to call this navbar. And it already exports it on the start, so we don't really need to make any other changes. So let's now see what happens if we just place the navbar inside of our app.jsx file and then start our server. So if we go to the app.jsx file, we can on the top do an import of navbar, which will take all of the stuff from the navbar file. So now let's see what happens if I just place the entire block of the navbar above the routes. And then we can go to the terminal and make sure that we are in the frontend folder and start the server by doing npm run dev. And let's now check out the result. And when we now go to our application, you can see that we indeed have the same thing right here as in the example. So we have the different items on the left, the bar on the top. We even have the text that comes as default. And we also see on the bottom here that we have the homepage text. Now, ideally, what I would like is that this content would not be here at all, but that we would only see the content in between from the page that we are at. So if we are on home, I want to see the content of the home page. And if we go to /create, we want to see this is the create page. Now, another issue we have at the moment is if we inspect the content and we just select the home page, it currently does not take into account that we have a navbar on the side. It just fills up the full width of the page. And of course, ideally, we don't want that. We want the homepage content to fit within the gap between the drawer and the end of the screen. So we don't want it to overflow all the way over here, because otherwise we will not see anything. So let's now realize that. The first thing that we can do quite quickly in our navbar.jsx file is get rid of all of the typography that is inside of this example, because that will get rid of the text that we saw right there. And let's save that. Now, what we noticed earlier is that the content that was right here actually fit the size of the screen perfectly because it's next to the drawer. So it already takes into account the room that is left. So what we can do to make sure that the content is specifically in this place right here is create a parameter and then pass the content of the other pages in here through that parameter. So what we can do here is specify that in here we want to see a parameter called content. And then on the top of the screen, we're also going to say that navbar expects a parameter called content. And then inside of the app.jsx file, we can say in that for navbar, we expect something called content, because that is what that function is going to be expecting. And then in that complete block, we say that the content that needs to be in the middle of the screen is going to be all of our routes, because our routes actually represent the content that we want to see in the middle of our navbar. Okay, you can now see that we only have the content of this is the home page on the middle of the screen. And if I now inspect and I select the home page right here, it fits in the middle of the screen. So that's actually quite nice. Now, the only thing that I notice is that there seems to be some general CSS applied to our app. So this does not show the full width. So let's make a small change and make sure that the text of the homepage is not affected by some of the styling that was done initially. So back inside of our code, and you can see that inside of the source file right here, we have an app.css file and an index.css file. Now, in both of these files, we already have some configurations that determine how our application is styled. So you can see here that there are all different kinds of things on how logos should be placed and also about the max width, margins, and those kind of things. And that the text is aligned as a center. And this is impacting our app. Now this CSS was already there because when Vite created it, it has this nice page on the app.jsx file where we have some logos and a counter. And that's why they apply this styling. But for us, it's not going to be that relevant. And you will immediately see the effect because if I delete everything that is in the app.css file and we now go back, you will see that the homepage is now on the left-hand side, for example. Now we also need to do some stuff in the index.css file because also here we can see that there's a lot of stuff going on that we have not configured ourselves. And in there, I am going to remove everything that is not the root. So we only want to have the root right there. And now we also want to change some of the things here. So I'm okay with having the font already determined and the same with the line height and the font weight, because that just tells something about what the text looks like inside of our application. And I actually quite like that. But we also have stuff here for the color scheme, the color and the background color, and that's not necessarily required for us at this moment. Now also these bottom settings, I'm just going to leave that as is because it doesn't really impact us. And now when we go back to our application and we've deleted all of that styling, you can see that this is the homepage text lines up perfectly in the top left of our screen. And if we now inspect and we select this is the homepage, it fits perfectly inside of our navbar. And that is exactly what we wanted to achieve. So now that we have the basics complete, we can build this out a little bit more and tailor it to our needs. And the first thing what we want to do is make sure that we have some relevant menu items right here. Now inside of our code, if we go to the navbar, you can see that these items are currently being generated with the list, and then it's mapping over all different kinds of stuff in there. So what I'm going to be doing now is delete all of the lists that we currently have inside of our application, because we're going to make that completely our own. And let's also delete this box right here. And what I will now do is I'm going to be adding another parameter or another prop right here, which is going to be called navigation items. And I'm also going to place that on the top of this file because we want to have some navigation items that need to be passed to this menu. And you might wonder, how are we going to pass those to here? Well, I'm going to be creating a new file inside of this navbar folder, and I'm going to be calling this file menu.jsx. Now, of course, we could have stayed with the default that is in the documentation, but I actually want to have a little bit more of an elaborate list. It can be a little bit more fancy than this. And when we scroll up a little bit, you can see that under the data display of the components of Material UI, there is an item for lists. And in there, we will find a lot more variation of things that you can use inside of your application. So it here shows the basics where we have some of the items and also dividers and those kind of things. But if we scroll down even further, you will see the option for nested lists, which also shows you how you can add sub-items or subtitles right there. Now it also shows other things such as folder lists and some interactive kind of things. But what I want to do inside of our application is something like this, where we have nested items and also the possibility to add categories that describe what is going on. So for this nested list, I'm going to show the code, and we're going to copy over this code right here. And then inside of our application, we're going to go to menu.jsx, and I'm going to paste in the code that we just copied over. And I'm going to be calling this menu. And let's save that. And now inside of our navbar on the top, we can delete all of the stuff that we had here before. And then we can import our menu. So we say import menu from menu. And then we actually don't even need this prop right here. We can just get rid of it and place the total block of menu in the place where the navigation items need to be. So we can just say that in here, we expect the menu. And let's now save this. And when we're now back inside of our application, you can see that we have the menu from the documentation right here. And now we can customize this a little bit so that it looks exactly the way that I would like it. Now, if we go to the menu.jsx, we can make some changes. Inside of our application, we're going to be showing data from different football clubs. And inside of my menu, I want to have two lists. In the first part, I want to have it called football clubs, and I want to display our homepage with all of the data. But also later on, I want to have some sub items that split over the clubs between different countries. And then on the bottom, I also want to have another menu, which is specifically for creating records. So what we can already do right here is we're going to be calling this subheader, which refers to this part right here. We can rename that to football clubs. And let's save that. And now it indeed reflects that right here. Now in the end, what I would like to do is have one specific homepage, which shows all of the data. And on the left here, I want to have different kinds of menu items for the different countries that we have, and have that as subheaders under the main thing. So what we can do inside of our code is get rid of the send mail one and also get rid of the drafts one. And we're going to be taking the one which already has the expand logic as the main example. Now what I actually want is that this thing is going to be the homepage, but I'm going to be calling it something like all clubs, because we're going to be displaying football club data, and in there I want to see all of the football clubs. So that's going to be the title. And now on the left we can also see that it's being called like that. Now the icon is still the inbox icon, and if we go to the material UI documentation and we're going to be looking for icons, we can actually get our own icon that we think is relevant. Now in this case I want something that resembles a dashboard. So I'm going to be using this, which is the dashboard icon. So we can copy it over like this, go to the top of our file and then import that dashboard icon. And then we can place the dashboard icon right here instead of the inbox icon. And let's save that. And now by default, and now you can see that on the left hand side we have this icon instead of the icon that we had before. Now, as I mentioned, below this, I want to have different kinds of menu items for the different countries. Now, currently, we're not that far yet that we have defined database data and that we can use that to create menu items. So for now, I'm just going to be hard coding some of the countries. So in here, let's make one menu item for the Netherlands, which is this part right here. And then we can copy this, and let's also fix this indentation a little bit so that it's a little bit more clear to see. And then we can paste it and also make an item for India. And let's do even one more, where we say that we also want to have a separate item for France. And let's save that. And now you can see that we have 3 sub items underneath clubs, and we can close and open them whenever we like. Now also here we still have the star icon, and that's not really what we want. So also here we're going to go back to the material icons, and we're going to do something like this, because it shows it's kind of a subpart of the total thing. So let's copy over this link as well, and we're gonna be pasting that on the top here. And then we're just going to be replacing all of those star icons, which are called here the star border, and we're going to be replacing that by the new icon that we have just found. And let's save that. And now it already looks a lot better, where we have one main thing for all of the clubs and then some sub items for clubs from different countries. Now, what I also mentioned is I actually want to have another subcategory and another item here for specifically creating records. Now, to do that in our code is actually quite easy. We can just copy over this entire list, and then we can simply below it paste it again. Now this is going to show me a lot of red lines, and the reason for that is that in your return statement you need to have everything inside of one block, and currently that is not the case. So what we can do on the top in the return statement is just make some empty blocks like this, and then just make sure that the closing tag is completely on the bottom, because it will recognize that as one total block, and then it is all good, like this. Now for this second list, we actually don't want to have this nested stuff. So what I will do is I'm gonna get rid of the total collapse thing that is in here, and also all of the sub things, because that's not gonna be that relevant. And now we just have the top part right here and then one separate menu item. Now actually in here I still see logic for expanding it, so we can also get rid of that because we don't need it. And let's also remove the on click because we don't actually want it to do anything. And then we can just fix some of the indentations here. Make sure that the text is on the same level. And this is going to be pointing towards my create page. So I'm going to be calling this create clubs because we of course are going to be creating football clubs. And let's save this. Now also here, I have a dashboard icon, but we want to have something else. So in the material UI icon library, I want to say that I want something that resembles add. And I like this one with the add box. So I'm going to be copying over that one. And similarly as before, on the top, we can just paste the add box icon, copy that one over, and then paste it on the dashboard icon because we want to have an add box icon. And now we have this menu, which already looks quite good, where we have football clubs here. And actually also we need to change this. So we're going to be changing the second subheader not to football clubs, but creating records. And of course, this is just one example, but you can make it as crazy as you would like. And just like that, we have already quite an attractive menu. Now, of course, we can click these kind of things, but it doesn't really go anywhere. Because at the moment, yeah, this doesn't really work. So let's make sure that we actually have links there and that we can also determine when we are on a page, for example, on the create page, that we know that it's being selected. Now let's start by adding some links. Now to do that, we can go to the menu.jsx file and let's first remove some of these imports that are not really required anymore, just to clean it up a little bit. And then we can make an import which will allow us to add links. So we can import something called link, and that's going to be from React router. And we also used that package in the previous video. And you can see in the documentation that it's actually quite easy to add something like that. We can simply do to and then state where we want to go to. And it uses the link component to arrange that. But we, inside of our menu, we don't have the link components in there. We actually use a list item button as the basis for our menu items. Luckily, it's quite easy to work around it. So for example, in this first list item button where we have all of the clubs, this should resemble our homepage. So what we can do is we can set that the component is equal to link. And this is going to make sure that it is a link. And then we can just use to and then determine where this link needs to go to. And then we just do a slash because, as you know from our previous video, our homepage is actually located simply at the base URL. Now you can also see that our create page is at /create. So if we go to our menu.jsx file and we scroll down, we have the menu item here for creating clubs. So here again, we can say that the component is going to be equal to link. But then we say that to is going to be equal to /create. And let's save this and check if this will now work. So back inside of our application, and we're currently at the home page. And if I now click on create clubs, you can see that it switched to this is the create page. So this is working just fine. And if I now click on the home page on the all clubs, you can see that we are in the home page again. So this is working as we would like it to work. Now, currently, we are at the home page, but there's nothing that indicates that we are actually right here. It would be nice if this is highlighted so we know where we are. Now, that is also quite easy. The first thing that we need to do is make another import from React router, and that one is the use location. Because to determine whether we are at the page where we think we are, we also need to know where we actually are. And we can use location to see what the extension of the URL is. So on the top of our menu right here, what we will do is we're going to be creating a new constant, and that is be called location. And location is going to be equal to use location. And then we can also create a constant called path, and we're going to be calling that location.pathname. And of course, we want to see what that actually does. So let's console.log the path that we just have created there. And then inside of our console, we are able to see what the output is when we are on different pages. So we are now on the home page. And if I click on inspect and I go to the console, you will see that it prints that we are at a slash. But if we go to the create page, you can see that it now points us that we are in the slash create page. So the path variable will tell us what extension we are expecting here. So now half of the equation is done, but we just need to make sure that we can make something appear as selected. Now that is actually also really easy, because if we, for example, go to the first menu item of all clubs, we can simply put in the word selected and save that. And now you can already see that it has a slightly different color. So that is actually already enough to do it. Now, how are we going to make that appear when we are on the right location? Well, we can simply say that it needs to be selected, but only if we meet a certain condition. So we say selected, and then we say that we only want this one to be selected if path is equal to the slash, because this all clubs one has the location of slash. Now we can do the same thing for the one on the bottom here for the create. And we can say that we only want this one to be selected if the path is going to be equal to slash create. And let's save this. And now you can see that we are on the create page and this one is highlighted. But if we go to the all clubs page, which is the home page, this one is highlighted. So that is how you can make sure that the right item is actually selected. Now, currently I don't really like the color of selected that much, so we're also able to change that. So if we go back to the code, you can see that we have files called app.css. And the app.css is included in the app.jsx. And that means that everything that we add to the app.css will affect the entire application. So in here, we can just add styling for all the parts in all of the different files. Now, if we go to the page right here and we inspect what it looks like when something is selected, we can see inside of the HTML that there's something called MUI/selected. So this determines whether something is selected or not. So this is also something we can use in the app.css to style the thing that is selected. So I'm going to copy that over. And inside of the app.css file, we can do a dot and then paste in the MUI selected. And then we can open some squarely brackets. And in there we can say that the background color can, for example, be bright blue. And then we also need to do something called important. And that means that it's going to override what was already there in the first place. So let's save this. And now the menu item is actually bright blue. So that achieves what we want to do, but it doesn't look that nice. Now I have already figured out what color code I want to use there. So I'm going to use a color called 2AB 0EF1D. Now, of course, you can pick any color that you would like. If you hover over this, you can see that I'm using some kind of a very light blue, which is quite vague because that's what this thing does. And if we now save it and we go back, you can see that's quite light blue like this. So that's the small change that I made. But feel free to make it whatever you would like. Okay, so now we've already done quite a lot of stuff there. The next thing that I would like to do is add an image to this navigation menu. So let's see how we can do that. Because of course it would look a lot better on the top if we would have an image instead of this clipped drawer. Now for this video, I actually created my own logo so I can use it for this application. And I will also include this file inside of my GitHub, so you can also use it if you want to follow along. So if you're going to tutorial 4, you should be able to see that image in assets, and then it's called logo CBI app. Now the first step is actually getting access to this logo inside of our menu.jsx file. And then we can go to the components and to the menu.jsx file. And then we can say that we want to import logo, which is just a name I give it. And then we can say from, and we need to specify the path of where we can find the logo. Now, the way that this kind of stuff works is that we need to navigate to the assets folder to actually get there. Now, the rule is if we do 2 dots, then we go 1 folder back. So if I do 2 dots and then a slash, we are at the navbar folder, which is here. But I actually need to go back even further because I want to be in the assets folder. So if I do ... and slash again, you can see that we can now go into the assets folder. And after that, we can specify the name, which is logo CBI app.png. And just like that, we have imported this logo into our menu.jsx file. Now that's great, but we don't need it inside of the menu.jsx files. We actually need it in a navbar file, but it works exactly the same way. So just copy it over and put it in your navbar file. And now we want to change the clipped drawer, which is right here, with our logo. So we can simply go to clipped drawer, and we can also get rid of the typography right here because we don't really need that. And we can now place it inside of this toolbar by setting in an image tag by doing img. And then we can set src equal to logo. And let's see what that looks like. Okay, so the logo is now there, but it's quite big. So let's change that a little bit. And we can now in here set the width of this logo equal to 10%. And let's save that. And now you can see that it actually looks quite okay. So we now have a nice looking logo on the top of our navbar. Now as a next step, I want to give the user the possibility to not only see this fully expanded menu, but also add a button that reduces this to just the icon menu, so that the user can pick whether they want to see everything in detail or only want to see the starting icon. And it will look very similar to the mini variant drawer that we have in the documentation of Material UI, where we can click this button and then the full menu is visible. But if we close it, we only see the icons like this. Now inside of our code, it means that we need to make a few changes. One of the first things that we will do is we're going to make a copy of the menu.jsx file. And we're going to be calling this not menu, but short menu. And we're also going to make a change to this right here. And we will also call this short menu. And let's save that. Now inside of this menu, we want to have the exact same information as we had before, but we don't have any need for the text because we only want to display an icon. And also a lot of these sub items, which are visible right here, are not going to be required because when this becomes a very small menu, we only want to see the icon for the all clubs and for the create clubs, meaning that also these subheaders here can actually go. So what we're going to do on the top is we're going to start by deleting the subheader right here because there's no longer a need to have that. And then we can also delete the list item text from the first button because we don't want to have any text right there. We only want to have the icon. And also the expand less and expand more thing can go. Now we also see quite a big collapse statement right here, which makes sure that we have all of those sub items. And also here, this can completely go because we don't need that inside of our list. We only want to have the main event, which is this list item bucket. Now the same goes for the create. Now what we can do is of course edit this list, but actually I'm just going to copy over the list item button from this list and just put it in the first list here, because there's no longer really a requirement for two lists because we don't have different subheaders. So this list can completely go. Now also here we're going to be getting rid of the text of the list item text because we only want to see the icon, and for the rest everything will remain the same. And also here on the first one we can remove the on click statement because we don't need to do anything like that. And let's also then delete this on the top. And let's also quickly fix the imports because some of them we don't need anymore. So let's get rid of the list subheader here as well. And we can also get rid of some of the icons. And let's save that. Now the second part where we need to make a change is inside of our navbar, because currently you can see that we have just placed the content of the menu in here as a block. But now we will have two blocks because we also have short menu. Now to make sure that everything there goes well, we need to add some functionality that allows us to either open the big menu or the short menu. So the first thing we need to define inside of this navbar.jsx file is a constant that tells us whether we want to see the big menu or whether we want to see the small menu. So I'm going to add a constant right here, and we're going to be calling that is big menu, and then set is big menu. And that is going to be equal to use state. And by default, the value is going to be equal to true. And also on the top here, we're going to be slightly changing this import. We're going to do import react and use state. And we're going to be importing that from React. So now we have a variable that's going to tell us whether we want to see the big menu or whether we don't want to have that. Second step is actually importing our short menu so that we can use that inside of this file. And then we're going to be using this constant right here to define whether we want to see the big menu or the short menu. So we can go all the way down until we have the place where our menu is mentioned. And in there, we are going to create a conditional statement between these brackets. And there we say is big menu. And if that is true, which we evaluated that question mark, then I want to have the block of menu being shown on the screen, because that's going to be our bigger menu with the text. And if that is not the case, which we indicate with this colon, we can say that we want to have the short menu. And let's save that. Well, currently we don't see a lot going on here because is big menu is still true and we see the big menu right here. So that seems to be working fine. Now let's see what happens when we set this to false. So we would not be expecting to see the big menu. And now when we are back, we can see that we have only the icons, and the icons still go to the create page and to the home page. Now, one of the things you will notice is that the width of this drawer is still exactly the same width. Because if we take a look at our code on the top, we have one constant called drawer width, which is set to 240. And that is being used to determine the exact width of this whole thing. So what we also would like to do is have a constant called short drawer width. And this will be the width that we would like to see whenever our short menu is shown, which we're going to set to 80. And then we can go down to the place where the width is actually defined. And in there, after width, we can say that we also want to have that same conditional statement. So we say is big menu, and then a question mark. Then we would like to see the drawer width, which is 240. But if that's not the case, and we do it with a colon, then we want to have the short drawer width. So then the width should only be 80. Now let's save this. And now we can already see that the menu is much smaller. So this already looks much better. Now if we take a look at this menu, you can see that the icons are not perfectly centered in the middle. So let's quickly fix that in the code as well. And we can go to the short menu.jsx file. And in there, in the list item button, we can define sx, which is for the styling. And then we can say that display in here needs to be equal to flex, and that justify content can be equal to center. And then we're going to paste this exact same command and also put that inside of the list item icon. And that should make sure that both of these things are going to be centered. And indeed, if we now go to the front end again, you will see that this icon is now perfectly centered. So let's also enable that for the other one, which is the create. So we can copy over the sx command and just put that in the top line for the list item button, but also for the list item icon. And let's save that. And now they're both centered in the middle. And what I also notice is that the text for the homepage is still on the same place as before, but actually we would like that to come to the left as well. So let's quickly solve that here as well. Now to do that, we're going to go back to the navbar.jsx file. And next to the width of the MUI drawer paper, we also need to do this conditional statement in this width right here, because that's still set on the drawer width. So we also need to change this. So we're just going to copy over this same conditional statement and then place that for the width of the SX there as well. And now we can see that this is the homepage is also on the left-hand side. Now, of course, we would like to have a button with which we can either open the menu or close the menu. So let's now add that and make sure that we can use a button on the top left that allows us to open up the menu, but also to close it. So let's first add some icons. And on the material icons page right here, we can take a look for the menu. And then you can see that we have this menu open icon, but also the menu icon. And these are the two that I want to be using to close and open it. So if it's closed, I would like to have this one visible so that we can open it up. And if it is open, I would like to have this one so that we have an indication that we can close it again. So let's first copy over this menu open icon. And we're going to be placing that on the top of the navbar.jsx file. And the same thing we're going to be doing for the menu icon, so that we also have that inside of the project. Now I would like to have this button next to the logo on the left hand side. So what we will do is we're going to go to the place where we see the image. And on top of the image, we're going to be using something called an icon button. So let's use icon button from Material.ly. And let's also make sure that that is imported on the top. I don't see it right here. So let's do import of icon button from @mui/material. And now inside of this icon button, we can have some content. So what I would like to see is that if the menu is equal to open, then we would like to have the menu open icon, and otherwise just the menu icon. So in here, we just do the same thing as before. We say is big menu, and then a question mark. And if that is the case, then we want to have this menu open icon. So we can just place that right here. And let's get rid of this colon. And then if that is not the case, and that is where we will use the colon for, then we would like to see the menu icon like that. And let's save this. And now when we go to the front end, we can see that we have this icon right here. And right now we see the menu icon because the menu is actually closed, and this will allow it to open. Now, a few things that I would like to do is I would like to have a little bit of margin on the right so that the logo is further down the line. And also I would like this to be white. Now to do that, we can add SX, so styling again, to this icon button with 2 parentheses. And then we say that margin right can be equal to 25 pixels. And then we can also say that color is going to be equal to white. And let's save that. And now you can see that we have this nice looking white icon, and the football logo is a little bit further to the right, but I actually wanted to align with this. So let's try to give it a margin right of 30 pixels. And now it kind of looks aligned with this part right here. Now it's nice that we have a button, but actually nothing happens yet. So what we want to do is want to create a function that if we click this button, it shows the bigger menu. And if we then click it again, it shows the smaller menu. Now doing that is relatively easy. What we can do on the top of the screen is we can say that we want to have a constant called change menu. And then we do an equal sign and some round brackets. And after that, an arrow function and then some squirrely brackets. Now in there, we can simply say that set is big menu needs to be equal to not is big menu. Now what does this actually do? It's going to use set is big menu to change the value of is big menu. And we're going to set that value to the opposite of what it is right now. And the reason that this works is that we use true and false to evaluate this. So by doing an exclamation mark and then is big menu, it will set the value to the opposite of what it is right there. So if it's false, it will set it to true. And if it's true, it will set it to false. Now all we need to do now is make sure that this function is being triggered. And it needs to be triggered by the icon button. So what we can do is we can add something in the icon button, which is called onClick, which means that every time we click it, we want to do a certain thing. And in this case, we want to change menu. So every time we would click this icon button, it would change the value of this big menu to the opposite of what it is right now. So let's now go back and hopefully the functionality now works. So we are back, and when we now click this icon, you can see that we're getting back to the bigger menu, and also the icon is now changing. And when we click it again, it will close, and yeah, we can just keep on doing that all together. So this seems to be working just fine. And that is actually all that I wanted to show you for this video. In this video, we created a nice looking navbar with multiple items and subheaders, which also has the possibility of becoming a smaller icon menu. In the next video, we're going to continue working on the backend. So we're going to be creating our database tables inside of our SQLite database. And in the videos to come, also make sure that we have APIs to bring data from the backend to the front end. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.